Hello. The Tonight I didn't have a topic, but I had a paragraph that I was reading at home that I'd like to share and kind of see what comes up around it. It's from The Myth of Freedom by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And it goes, in Buddhism, we express our willingness to be realistic through the practice of meditation. Meditation is not a matter of trying to achieve ecstasy, spiritual bliss, or tranquility, nor is it attempting to become a better person. It is simply the creation of a space in which we are able to expose and undo our neurotic games, our self-deceptions, our hidden fears and hopes. We provide space through the simple discipline of doing nothing. Actually, doing nothing is very difficult. At first, we must begin by approximating doing nothing, and gradually our practice will develop. So meditation is a way of churning out the neurosis of the mind and using them as part of our practice. Like manure, we do not throw our neurosis away, but we spread them on our garden. They become part of the richness. Not a lot comes up because it feels like it's pretty well said. I think what was inspiring for me around it was that it actually feels like a workable situation. I feel that we're always sold some line of reasoning that tells us to be better or that we need to improve. And a lot of that inspiration is watching my own mind thinking that that's what has to be done. Just little comments in any direction about how my life could be better or how it's not going so well, and I self-deprecate. So I think that it's just inspiring to hear that we have a practice to work with. We have a teaching to work with, incredible teachers to work with. I liked the phrase that we create space, and that we begin to do nothing by approximating that space. I thought that that was an interesting way to put it. I'm not sure that I understand it, but I found it to be helpful to look at it that way, that we're maybe even artificially creating some space by holding our body still and intending to receive. And that can feel pretty rigid and artificial, that we're a receiver who's going to pick up on everything, and then we comment on how well we're doing about that. Another aspect that was inspiring about this was the part about the neurosis being manure for our practice. I have maybe a personal story of working with Sokuzan. When I moved into the monastery, right before I moved in, I smoked cigarettes, and as part of my agreement to move into the monastery, I quit smoking cigarettes, and I made it maybe 3 months to 6 months, and then I started again. And I don't think that this is necessarily for everyone, but the part that I remember in a Dokuzan with Sokuzan, oh, I hate that phraseology, Dokuzan with Sokuzan. He told me around me trying to quit and trying to work with that addiction, I would always throw away my lighter and pack of cigarettes and say, this is the last time. And then the next day I'd buy it again. And he told me to keep the lighters and stack them all up, like to never get rid of that. Like I don't have to, that he doesn't care basically if I smoke or don't smoke. At least for me personally, that he cared more about my awareness of the situation, and that I can't just throw out that part of me that thinks that that's wrong and that I need to improve. And even though it's relatively very harmful and not a good idea to do that, but I apparently couldn't help but doing that because I was doing it. So it was inspiring to hear that that you shouldn't throw anything away, even if it looks like you're a terrible person. But why are you smiling?
Who is smiling? Junshu. Oh.
Think I have anything else to talk about? Could I receive some questions? Thank you.
Shadow bowing is, or does that spreading the manure idea include like just dumping our difficulty on each other? Like, is there a aligned bowing?
I'm not taking this as permission to do that, that should be our practice to just unleash ourselves on the world. I think the manure aspect is just to be aware of it, to if you really can't help but be an asshole to people or what have you, then just be aware of that to the best of your ability. Don't make yourself a better person. Try to have a willingness to be the things you want to get rid of.
Shadow bowing. I'm looking at that area where I think I'm aware of something, but I'm aware of like the story I'm telling myself about it. But so I'm looking at, I might think I'm aware of how I'm being an asshole, but I'm not actually seeing the depth of that. Can you say what is it to see that beyond our idea of it? Bowing.
I don't think you would necessarily know about it. I think it's more of the intention to return to being aware of that. If you think that you're being aware of it, you're more than likely not. You might have more clarity than you did 6 months ago about it, and the storyline has changed in such a way that you can see that part of it better, or it changes, it gets brighter and it gets dimmer. And we think we understand ourselves better relatively. So we're starting to piece it together, but it's just another shining of the surface. So it's just another cover up, and you can be aware of that too.
Shadow bowing. Is there some aspect on the spiritual path that we sort of stop knowing who we are? Bowing.
Maybe I'm not a little bit, I think. I think that the relativity still shows up. It's not like a strange forgetfulness of who you are. Yeah, but I think it vacates or moves elsewhere a little bit.
Shadow bowing. And I'll try to go into that a little bit more. I'll ask it again in a minute if I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Pain bowing. He uses the image of undoing neurosis while also describing spreading the neurosis on the garden. I'm wondering how you understand or reconcile undoing and including bowing.
I think I'm understanding the undoing is not that it necessarily goes away. I think of it as like a magnetism toward it, or you could say belief, disbelief, or looking away from it. So that energy to move what's arising in a particular direction, in a sense is, it wasn't giving up. I forget the phrase, undoing. So that's kind of how I'm imagining undoing, is it's sort of lost its pull, that it needs to be something else or needs to do anything whatsoever.
Pain bowing, so it's not to get punny about it, but maybe less like dismantling and like literally undoing something about it, like not doing something. Bowing.
Yeah, I like that, and I think dismantling might be how some people could describe it too. I think that relatively there might be a bit of that. I don't think it's a guarantee. I think you might just be as speedy as ever, even if you're clear. Undo.
Ondabai, earlier, Sokazan was saying that peace and basically discord in the Sangha were the same thing. How is that the case, Alex?
I think two ways show up for me is just relatively that peace gets its meaning from war. So you can't have one without the other. It's just ends of the spectrum. And then the other way of talking about it is just parts of consciousness, or in the sense that they're illusory, they're the same in their fundamental nature. They're empty of a self, they're suffering. And one other thing.
Ondabai, how, when there is that discord in the Sangha, is there a way to see that differently with that teaching, Valley?
Sure, I think you could attempt to appreciate it or attempt to receive it, even though it's distasteful. It looks like it's discord. If that's kind of what you're getting at it, just to try to make everything more workable a little bit as far as awareness goes, or seeing it.
Ondabai, it seems like that's like inviting space. Is that too much? Valley?
I don't know, or I think it, I don't know. I don't know you well enough, I think, to say if that would be too much for you or not. That might be a really good way to say it. I'm not sure. I think that would show pretty differently for people. You know?
You're allowing the don't improve. So we're not to try to improve, but does improvement happen on its own?
I think it could, but I don't think that there's a guarantee about it. I think that generally the amount of stillness in this practice is probably going to slow someone down and relatively kind of calm down a little bit. But I don't think that that's the case for everyone. I think it could. The other way of talking about it, how it probably not going to feel like improvement the further along we get, that you're able to receive more suffering, you're able to receive your own suffering. And I think that that could kind of ramp things up, or you might have to go through some passages that you might have been able to avoid or continue to avoid, but through this practice, you're going to unleash it and you're going to look at it, whether that's in someone else or in yourself.
You're bowing. Have you improved?
No, I don't think so. Shodo?
Shoto bowing. How have you seen don't improve, misunderstood, or misused bowing?
I don't know. I guess it doesn't really hit me in that way or with that language. I found it to be helpful myself because of the amount of improving mentality that's happening here. Maybe I can see kind of where you're going with it, that you could take it too far. You can take anything too far. Do you have an idea around that or an example?
Shoto bowing. No, not like anything I've actually witnessed. Bowing.
How many lighters do you have?
Well, I didn't do it even. Mioka.
Nyoka bowing. What is the sentence that has approximate in it? Well, I think it was approximate space, but I'm not sure.
At first, we begin by approximating doing nothing, and gradually our practice will develop.
What is it to approximate doing nothing?
For me, I think that just shows up as the form, or lots of the forms, but sitting meditation is approximating doing nothing, and then you realize that as a self, you can't do nothing, and even as a body, you can't do nothing. So it's a bit of an approximation to, and it feels kind of absurd in the beginning, like space is actually the unnatural part that we really think we're someone, and then like the space is actually fearful. It's a little bit harder to get into that space of spaciousness.
Nyoka bowing. Is there anything to approximate or to become closer with?
Kinda. I think that there is, but it's not really like, you can't really get closer to it. And it's not really a thing that you can get close to. But I think something like that does happen, just as a way of talking about it. Junshu?
Bowing, what would that more fundamental doing nothing? How would that contrast to the body sitting still and doing nothing?
I'm not sure I follow your question, but I don't think anything would necessarily change, or that's what shows up, is that it doesn't have to change, or like it. But I don't think when you get closer to that aspect that I was talking to Miyoka about, that there's a difference, or that you can't say anything changed. The space doesn't do anything to what arises, it just receives it. Ishin?
Bowing. I think in the last sentence that you read was something about neurosis becoming a part of the richness. What is that richness, and how neuroses are becoming a part of it? Bowing.
And how is neurosis becoming a part of it? Is that your last?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Not sure how to answer that. I think it could also be said that that's the entire practice, is receiving all the neurosis in our mind, or that's the entire practice itself, is it's nothing but neurosis. We might have it polished and think that we're, have something, but it's more than likely neurosis. And it does enrich our lives if we're able to include that. It's maybe just less of a tension. We're not so concerned with the neurosis being there. It's welcome.
Thank you. How do you understand that richness? Bowing.
I don't know, that's kind of hard for me to describe. I think just that what shows up is just that it's a colorful illusion, that it's quite amazing that any of this is happening at all. And it's convincing and outrageous and black and it's white, it's neurotic, it's pleasurable, it's just another another piece of the mosaic. It's valuable. It's I don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you. Is it sacred? Bowing.
It's sacred.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nishin.
It's like you, Nishikai. Thank you.
Why not?
I think just because it goes too far, it's just another misunderstanding to call everything sacred, or it's like everything is my teacher. Most people that say that probably don't see what this is, or that it's an easy cover up to say everything's sacred and you get to be included in that sacredness too. You're like, you're the one, it's just an idea about what's happening also. I can turn it into a book study and read the next paragraph. Shut up.
So, bowing. It's kind of off, so sorry if this isn't a good question for this, but I'm curious about Sogazan says he teaches via negativa, like to your point about sacred. And I'm curious if you could say about how that's been helpful or anything around that, bowing.
This is or what shows up is I've watched a lot of Alan Watts videos, some of it to dubstep and techno in the background too.
We worked together for a while.
But one thing that stuck out to me from one of Alan Watts's talks was it's better to destroy people's ideas than, I forgot the then, but then to kind of be kind to them, that's actually more kind, is to destroy their ideas, or because we make little nests in our concepts. It's kind of what a self is a little nest of meanness and all the stories that go around it. So it's a little bit better to, from a teacher's standpoint, to challenge that and go after that if possible. That seems like it could be more helpful than just being kind and supportive. That there needs to be a bit of a shock or someone you trust to go into that with.
Shadow bowing. I feel like we've just past few months, people have been asking questions about abuse, and what you're talking about sounds like an area where that's confusing. I'm sorry the question's not clear, but I'm wondering if that's enough for you to go into like how we can work with that bowing.
What shows up for me is who better to go into it with than the person you chose as your teacher. Who else are you gonna receive negativity from? Is it just gonna be some random person on the street and you're gonna train your mind with them when you're pissed off? Probably not. It's probably better if it comes from the teacher. If you have such a deep connection with him anyway, that why turn just because he gets a little rough, just because he yells at you? It's the worst that our teacher does. And not always, and not for everyone. I think it can go deeper than that, and I don't mean to justify anyone's abuse or feel that it's right, but it's how it shows up to me, is especially for the people in this room are pretty dedicated practitioners in Buddhism, have chosen to give the benefit of the doubt to the teacher. So I think we should endeavor to receive our projected abuse, or what we're calling abuse.
Shadow bowing. If there's no self, is abuse a misperception? Bowing.
I mean, the abuse, I guess you could say, is always relative, that there's no one to abuse, but I hesitate to go into that area, or I don't see how that's useful. Could you ask the question again?
Shadow bowing. I think the question was if there's no self is abuse a misperception. Bowing.
Yeah, on one hand, yes, there's no one to be abused, but that has to be realized. That can't just be something you think about. That can't just be your idea that there's no self, so this isn't abuse because there's no self. Doesn't work that way. We're in this. We are the relativity. So the relativity is important. We need to see that abuse in relativity is important, and yeah, it's difficult. Hogan?
Hogan Valley, you said that it's going to show up whether it's coming from within or outside of yourself. In that area of anger being yelled, in that area of being yelled at from the outside, and comparing that to anger which arises on the cushion, how is that anger that is directed toward you not an interruption in your practice?
I don't think anything's an interruption in the practice, or I'm not quite understanding, and neither is the one that's arising in you. That is your practice. You're just watching what moves. Do you have a way to go into that a little more?
Hogan Ryan, you're saying it is that there's no difference between the two?
From the point of the student, or from the point of?
From the point of the student.
I don't think so.
I'm just sort of lost in that area, if there's anything more that comes up with how it looks as though life is happening to you in a different way than just what organically arises when you're sitting on the cushion. I don't have a direct question about it, but
Yeah, it just seemed or I think what you're describing is just how convincing the illusion looks. It really does look like someone's out there yelling at us, and it does look that way. But from a practice standpoint, it doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter if it's organic. Well, and both cases are organic. It's organic for someone to yell at you. They're not that much different. It still hits your mind nerve in the same way, or you're able to receive both. I think we just differentiate it through our thoughts about it. We think one is different than the other. We think when someone attacks us that they're probably wrong and all of this, and maybe in the stillness of meditation in your organic experience just feels more intimate, and maybe like you're able to receive it better. Or I won't go in there and say what that's like for you, but there's some differentiation happening between the two.
yes, thank you.
When you're bowing, what does matter? Bowing.
The response that came up is everything matters.
When you're bowing, but earlier, a few minutes ago, in response to Hogan, you said nothing. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't mean that we necessarily act like that. Both are just positions about it. I think
When you're bowing, so how can we interpret the teachings to apply either it matters or it doesn't matter? Bowing.
I think just situationally. Could you go further into that, or I maybe forgot where I said, everything matters, and could you flesh out some of the context on that? Would help me, I think.
Can you mind? I got distracted by what I thought was a kitty outside the window, but.
It is a kitty.
I do have another question though, in terms of abuse. The 10th precept is no abusing the three treasures. And I believe, no asceticism is no abusing the Buddha. No standpoint is no abusing the Dharma, and no self is no abusing the Sangha. So how do you see that 10th precept applying, bowing,
Applying to what?
whatever arises?
For me, it just shows up as a reminder to receive, or if I'm asked, how does that apply? I don't think it necessarily has to, but since we're talking about it, I think it's just another touchstone of awareness. I think it's just another way to recommit to seeing what this is, recommit to observing.
Thank you.
Junchu Bowing, when you were talking about the Alan Watts quote about it might be better to destroy people's ideas and the nest that we create. Why can't we destroy our own ideas and our own nest that we hold on to?
I think that we end up doing that. I think that it's us who does the work in the end. But when we're getting on the path, and while we're on the path, we should use everything we have. And the structure is here. It's over 2,000 years old. There's something to it. There's some support in the lineage. So it says to look at the teacher, to use the teacher, to receive from the teacher. And I don't think it has to show up via negativity or that. I think everyone's different. I think that quote only goes so far too. Anything further? Thank you. No,
In low value. Can a student know what is supportive to their practice?
I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like I can, like in a genuine way, that in retrospect, that something has been really helpful. But in the moment, if I think something is supportive, I'm not so sure anymore, or that's a little bit more fishy. Yeah, so I think that things are supportive, but how to talk about that, or how to say, is it supportive or not supportive? That's where we're already in the arena of plus and minus a little bit.
Sure, bowing. What does it mean to support the Sangha? Bowing.
First thing that shows up is just your presence is supportive, just you practicing is supportive. You receiving the Sangha is supportive, just in everyday interactions if you're walking down the hallway. And that's not to say that your neurosis doesn't end up being supportive to others too. So that's why it's more about just showing up, just be around the Sangha. That for me feels like the emphasis is just interact with these people. But beyond that, I wouldn't worry about like trying to support them, just be here, see what happens in the social interactions. And then there's the practical aspects too of you keep this monastery running. You support the Sangha very relatively in that way too. But I would say just presence, just being here. Tishin? Go ahead, Abby. Sorry, Tishin. Abby, did you have a question?
No,
Okay, back to Jishin.
Jishin Bowen. How do you destroy somebody's idea and support that person at the same time? Bowing.
I think that is supportive if it's done in a way that's I'm not sure how to differentiate how someone could do that not out of their awareness and it wouldn't feel very helpful. But I'm just thinking of Sokuzan, the ability to point at our neurosis and there's no person behind that. There's no, or this is my very subjective feeling and painting of it, is that there's no like tendrils. He's not trying to do anything. There's not someone who's mad at me by going after my solid ideas. I think he's trying to help me. Can you ask your question again or a different one?
Jishin Bowing, thank you. I understand this in the context of Sokuzan's teachings. I have exactly the same perception of it. I believe that he always tries to help us. But I'm wondering, since you said that something about destroying somebody's idea in the context of neurosis, I guess, I'm wondering how it can be done to support the person and at the same time destroy the idea that person has. Bowing.
Because our ideas are making our lives miserable. It's helpful to have that examined, but when someone points out our misunderstanding to us, maybe we don't have to do that. Maybe we do have to do that, but at least we can see what's happening.
How can we communicate to somebody that the idea they have in their mind is it's neurotic, it's not real, without losing the connection with that person? Bowing.
I would say more as a standard, don't do that, or that doesn't, it's not a blanket teaching. For me, that shows up in a very intimate way of you shouldn't, like generally, you shouldn't point out other people's neurosis. You should probably just be kind and support them. And in the case of destroying someone's idea in this context, that would be very situational, and how that's done, I think, would be so many different ways. It doesn't even have to be mean. Sometimes, yeah, that can just show up a lot of different ways, and it's pretty intimate and depends on the two people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shadow bowing. Can I ask the personal question about your practice? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you could say over the years, do you tend to do what Sokuzan asks or not do what he asks? Bowing.
I'd say it takes me a long time, or like my way of characterizing it would be I usually can't at first, and then it might even look like I'm failing at it more. But yeah, I'd say can't if I had to choose one. I feel like I'm not real quick to follow, that it really has to be my understanding to do it. And that's true in most of my relationships with people. It's really I'm kind of self-centered in that way. If I don't just listen to someone's advice, and yeah, there has to be a strong feeling in me to be able to do something.
Total bowing. Have you ever felt like you've been punished for the way that you've had to, or any like retaliation for not being able to do it right away? Bowing.
Not from Sokuzan or yeah, I think most of it was self-imposed. It was me not liking that I'm not showing up a certain way. And I'm not thinking of specific examples, but I feel like there's been pressure, so to speak, to tighten up a little bit, even from other people other than Sokuzan or just functionaries here at the temple, because my style is so loose. So I think that, yeah, that was helpful. I kind of agreed with them as far as probably do need to try to do this a little bit more, you know. Okay.
Hogan bowing. In some Buddhist circles, the Sangha is the circle of enlightened beings. In this context, the Sangha is more loose, perhaps including not just the monastics, but lay people. Do you lean in one direction or another as to how to define what Sangha is and why it's important to include bowing?
I wouldn't say I lean any particular way. If I'm catching the meaning of what that's saying, is people who are training their mind kind of being like the more immediate Sangha, that there's perhaps more teaching opportunity to surround yourself with people who are training their mind, even if they're not awake. And then to extend it further. But yeah, I think Sangha eventually includes everyone.
Hogan bowing Sangha eventually includes everyone, not even those that are training their mind, and animals and bowing.
Especially
Babies.
animals. I think so. I think for me that shows up as the intention. I mean, these are just the guidelines, the instruction, and then I think it eventually does just need to be your life. I think you need to receive your life, and this is the way to do it, is the teachings in Buddhism. It's just a area to focus.
One more question.
You know,
In low bowing. How do these talks support your practice?
what shows up first is I really appreciate the opportunity to feel terrible and do it anyway is been really helpful to me, to not want to do this. And when I grab a drink of water, my hand is shaking, and just to be able to see how I'm squirming, that I don't always have opportunities to see that otherwise, or it seems like it's more shielded. And other than that, I think I just feel supported by the people in this room, and the questions help me see what I know and don't know, and it helps me see when I elaborate, when I shouldn't elaborate, and when, yeah, it just helps me see my mind in a way that's harder to see in other areas. Thank you.
penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Shi Shi Ku Shi Son Bu Sa Mo Ko Sa Mo Ko Ja Ho Ro Mi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.